All right, so in this video, we're going to look at the dermis. Again, we're in chapter 6 of the integumentary system. We previously went over the general characteristics of the entire system. And then the last video, we looked at the epidermis. And now we look at the dermis and some of its components. So the dermis, again, this is the thickest part of the skin, the area we call the integumentary system. And so it is going to have these projections that stick up, that wavy basement membrane between the epidermis. Again, I'm sorry about my spelling here, trying to use my mouse pad. The epidermis versus the dermis here, and those little projections are called dermal papilla. That is where the little finger-like capillary bed is. It is going to bind the outermost layer, the epidermis, to the underlying tissue. It is connective tissue. It's going to have some muscle in it. We'll look at that, and nerve. We'll look at that as well. It is going to be where the blood supply that's going to supply that dermal papilla is going to be. It's going to contain hair follicles, and which are going to contain the hair. It's going to have sweat and sebaceous glands. We'll look at those. We're going to look at some of the receptors. We have 2 of them here that we look at and study in lab, and we'll go from there. So the dermis consists of 2 layers. Now, again, we don't look at this in lab, but there's 2 layers. We have a very small papillary layer, which is this superficial layer. It really is basically, and I'll show you on the picture, but it's really basically this layer where there's going to be this intense capillary bed that's going to have these projections that we call dermal papilla that stick up from it. And that's why it is called this papillary layer. It is it's not a very deep layer. I probably would even say it's a tenth of the entire dermis. Maybe it's a little more than that, but not much. So it's a very small layer at the very top part of it, the superficial layer. The majority of the dermis is going to be this reticular layer. It is characterized by a connective tissue that we call dense irregular connective tissue. Now, I just want to take a minute to remind you, dense regular connective tissue was where we had densely packed, regularly aligned fibers, all packed this way, and they were the connective tissue of tendons and ligaments. And I said the reason, so this is a muscle on this one side and a bone over here, and so when this muscle contracts, this needs to be strong in one direction, so it has dense regular fibers, densely packed regularly aligned fibers, so that it's as strong as possible in one direction. So dense irregular means the fibers are kind of going in every direction. This gives the most strength in all directions. I sacrifice extra strength in any one direction because if I wanted in one direction, they would be regular. I sacrifice the extra strength in one direction to gain the strength in all directions. And again, it is this reticular layer is the deeper of the 2 layers. So I have a papillary layer and a reticular layer. So on this, if I was looking at it, I think red's going to show up here on mine, but this, if I just drew it right here, this little part right here would be the papillary layer. The rest of the dermis here is the reticular layer. Now, some of the accessory structures in here, we're going to look at hair and their little cocoons that we call hair follicles, nails, and the sweat glands, our skin glands that will consist of sweat and sebaceous glands. And again, if these structures get hurt, or if the body gets hurt, these structures, if they remain somewhat intact, they can regenerate. So nails, the first one we look at are nails. So the nail has 3 parts to it. And this is super simplistic. I have a nail plate, which is the visible portion of the nail. This is what you would think of as a nail. These cells are completely keratinized. Again, keratin is a huge part of the health of our skin, nails, and hair you're going to see. The nail bed is what is under the nail plate. The nail matrix is going to be the area of actively growing cells. This is going to be kind of equivalent to the stratum basal, and it is going to be on the proximal side of the nail that is closer inward, so to speak. I'm going to have this laluna. Lunar means moon, and it's kind of like a little half moon shape. This is what, if you look at your nails and you look right where the skin and the nail kind of overlap, a lot of times you'll see this little white, portion of a moon, and it's going to be that's what the lanula is. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure you see it, and we all can see it. And then the cuticle is actually the skin that's going to fold over that lanula. And again, if you've ever had a manicure, they'll kind of work on your cuticles. So here's the cuticle. Again, this is showing the little skin that's right here. This little white part here is the lanula. The actual nail is the nail plate. The skin that's underneath there that the nail plate rests on is called the nail bed. All right, and the nail matrix again is going to be very deep. It's going to be protected pretty well. And so this little area is where the cells are growing, and as they grow, they continue to push out, but they die and turn into this flat keratinized part that we call a nail, which is the nail plate, pretty quickly. Now, most of what we look at, especially in lab, was the hair and the hair follicles. So hair is present on all surfaces of the body except for the palms of the hands, the soles of the feet, the lips and nipples, and parts of the external reproductive organs. And so it's in most places of the body. So the hair itself has two parts to it. The hair, I'm trying to figure out a place I can draw it here. So if I put the basement membrane is right here, this is the surface of the epidermis. If I put the hair and I go this way, the part of the hair, and I'll change it to a different color here, the part of the hair that is from the basement membrane up is called the hair shaft. The part of the membrane that is down here is called the hair root. And so that's where we get this. We see this hair root here. Now the hair root is going to have this little cocoon around it. And it's actually coming from the epidermis. It's kind of strange, but it's still going to be around. It extends into the dermis, and it basically, like I said, forms this little cocoon around the hair. And that cocoon is going to, oddly enough, protect and hurt the cells and kill the cells kind of at the same time. But the process of killing the cells is actually turning it into what we call a hair. So when we look at the hair itself, the hair root, again, is going to be the part that's surrounded by the hair follicle. And in the hair root, the very bottom part, the deepest part of the hair root, is going to be kind of that area like the stratum basal. It's the area containing the highly mitotic, the cells that are going through division really quickly. Now, again, the hair shaft is the part that once the hair root and its surrounding thing called the hair follicle, the surrounding cocoon called the hair follicle, gets to the basement membrane, at that point, the hair follicle does not extend anymore. And so the hair is basically naked from the basement membrane outward. And so that part where the hair doesn't have anything surrounding it and protecting it is called the hair shaft. They are dead epithelial cells, and that is what we commonly think of hair. Now, hair itself is going to have this little area, we said the hair bulb, that is going through mitosis really quickly, and it needs oxygen, and it needs to get rid of carbon dioxide. And so we have this special little blood vessel, kind of like the dermal papilla, that are those special blood vessels that poke up and form those little ridges into the basement membrane and the stratum basal. At the bottom of the hair, I'm going to have a finger-like capillary bed. That's what papilla means, finger-like, a finger-like capillary bed that is going to extend into the bottom part of the hair follicle and nourish the hair root or the hair bulb, and so that it can divide. Um, Hair color. So when we look at hair color, it is due to this thing that we studied in the previous video called melanin. Right? So not only skin color, but hair color is going to be determined by this specialized pigment called melanin. The other thing that's going to be here is the erector pili muscles. They're going to be attached to the hair follicles, and um, for instance, if you've ever had chill bumps or goosebumps, when you get cold, you see all those little bumps. What's happening is my body recognizes that the temperature is lowering, and so I need to do something to raise it, negative feedback. And so my body sends out a signal to all of these little muscles, these erector pili muscles, which are smooth muscles. You do not have conscious control over them. And when they contract, it causes the hair to stand erect like a pillar. That's where we get erector pili muscle, erect like a pillar. Now, what's going on is in every muscle contraction, most of the energy is released as heat. And so in contracting all of these erector pili muscles and we see this goosebump pattern that appears, we are actually producing a little amount of heat. And if that warms you up, that's great. But if it doesn't, then our body sends signals out to our larger muscles, and that's when we start shivering. So the erector pili muscle. So I've got a hair that's got a hair shaft that's the naked part above this basement membrane of the epidermis. But below that basement membrane, we have the hair root. The hair root is surrounded by what we call a hair follicle. Um, in the hair root at the very bottom, we have what is called the hair bulb. And so this hair shaft at the deepest part of the hair shaft, or the hair root, I'm sorry, the deepest part of the hair root is called the hair bulb. The hair bulb is going to be producing more cells. It's going through mitosis like the stratum basal. And as it's producing them, that hair follicle, which is surrounding the hair root, is going to be killing and shaping them into the tube. And then when it leaves the protection of it, it is going out into the cold, cruel world, and it is called the hair shaft. And then again, every hair follicle is going to have an erector pili muscle attached to it to help respond to cold or fear, as it says here, and causes goosebumps, standing erect like a pillar. And so this is kind of the parts of it. I like our picture from lab a little better, but we will in another video look at these two types of sweat glands. We're going to have two types of sweat glands. One's more superficial, the merocrine sweat gland, versus the apocrine sweat gland, which is a little deeper. Merocrine sweat glands we're going to see are about temperature regulation. They are producing a very watery solution called sweat, and they are located through most parts of our body, but mainly on our back and on the back part of our neck. In this, the fluid they secrete doesn't have much of an odor. The apocrine makes you smell like an ape, actually. The apocrine, they are always going to have ducts that are attached to hair follicles, along with this other gland we'll look at in a minute called a sebaceous gland. Apocrine sweat glands, like I said, make you smell like an ape. These are associated with puberty, and they're going to be in two distinct areas: axillary, armpit, and groin area. And again, they get stimulated at puberty and they become active. And so that's a little bit of the dermis for the three major structures of it: the hair, the nails, and I forgot what the other one was, but that's all right. Anyway, we will see you in the next video. Take care.